Hello, I'm Stuart Preston, and this is the Stoned Ape Reports, where I have conversations with those who have changed their lives with the help of psychedelics. In this episode, I had the honor of speaking with Greg, who is an attorney and an author who writes about psychedelics and mental health. He shared his own personal story of overcoming addiction through the mystical powers of psilocybin. So let's hear from Greg. Greg, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the Stoned Ape Reports. Always good to hear from people out there who've had good experiences, and from what I know about your story, I think you've got some really good things to share out there. So first of all, thank you for joining me and for participating in this.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, Stuart. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to talk about, what challenges were going on in one's life before, they came to experience these journeys and make the changes. So why don't you give us a little bit of the backstory on what was going on in your life that really needed some changing?
Well, I think for me, Stuart, it's not so much challenges that brought me to the substances or the psychedelics or entheogens per se. Really what it was is what brought me to understand that these substances can be used as a tool to help heal and guide people in this life's journey. Because for me, I started taking drugs of all sorts, including psychedelics, at a very young age, about 12.
Wow.
I was an addict for 17 years, but probably around, so this would have been from like about 99 through 2015, but long about 2011, I had actually started to grow psilocybin, and let me mind you, I was still in the grips of active addiction at this time, but it was the first time I had what would be coined in the scientific literature as a mystical experience, in that I started to have these very profound insights. And to be honest, most of it was regarding my mother's death and then also my addiction. I was addicted to opiates and alcohol at the time. And, the mushrooms were basically telling me, like, look, this is horrible. You cannot be doing this much longer. You are not living up to your potential. So it was around that time, in those experiences, that I actually came to understand, just through my own experience, the potential of these substances to heal and help, mentally and spiritually and possibly physically.
And so what, the mystical experience, I mean, was it a one-time thing that it suddenly you realized that addiction wasn't helping, that it was hurting you, but was there more work to be done after that?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I will say this. So after it clicked that one time, Stuart, that my mind became aware of this potential, every experience after that had that quality or character to it. But, to be honest, I was addicted to opiates and alcohol, which is, I'm sure you're probably aware, come with severe physical withdrawal. And so even every time I would try to sober up after that, I could make it about 3 days before my willpower gave in, right? And so, it's even though that the mushrooms were telling me every time, like, hey, this is something that's got to go, I could only get so far by myself, in achieving that ultimate goal.
So what did it take then?
So what it took was I ended up on probation, and obviously I was still using, and I made it through about 8 of 12 months on a year probation, and then I ended up failing a drug test 1 month. So when I came in to check in the next month, which would have been January 2016, I was arrested and placed in jail for, the previous month's failed drug test. And, at that time, I ended up actually detoxing in a holding cell in the jail. And
wow.
Yeah, it was at that time I was approached by my father, who had worked with my lawyer and the judge to come up with a long-term treatment plan, which included entering a therapeutic community, which is an 18 to 24 month long, intensive inpatient treatment, which I chose to do at that juncture. I had beat myself up long enough, and I said, you know what, this is probably the only thing that's going to allow me to change and, obtain the life that I want.
So it sounds to me like maybe the entheogens opened your mind to some things, but
Yes.
it really took kind of going through the legal system to get you to the other side.
Yeah, and so let me speak real quick about, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talk about these downloads through a psilocybin experience. Have you heard people reference that?
Yeah, so during the journey, it feels like the filter comes off their brain and they get this download.
So when I was in treatment for the 31 months, there were periods, Stuart, where my emotional state was being affected in a non-intuitive way, right? So I would like reach these situations where I knew that my initial reaction was gonna be this, but I knew basically the downloads, I could feel them coming back to where it was affecting my behavior in a positive way at these crucial points throughout my experience in treatment and on afterwards as well. And so it was kind of crazy. I was able to pick up a lot of spiritual principles in recovery uh,
Hmm.
much quicker than my peers. And I don't have any scientific proof or data on this, but my feelings internally is that it can be relatable or related to the prior psilocybin downloads that I'd had the 4 or 5 years leading up to my treatment.
Yeah. So what was happening? Do you mind sharing a little bit about what that download was like and how it was helpful?
Yeah, so in a therapeutic community, it's meant to what I call keep people in their feelings, which means that there is constant adversity. Um, it's every day that you are faced with adverse conditions, situations, and you have to learn to overcome them. Most of this is achieved through what I would say emotional intelligence, in
Hmm.
being to separate our emotional reactions and responses from what we actually do, like our initial feelings of what we want to do from what we actually do or react to a situation. And so I feel that these downloads were allowing me to have a greater distance between the way I reacted to situations and my initial inner reaction to the situation, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
I was able to pick that up much quicker than my peer group who, through their testimony, I do not think were working with psilocybin anywhere near the depths that I was prior to, entry.
And how do you think that gave you an advantage?
Well, this facility I was in is so hard. Only 1 in 100 people ever make it through the program, and so I mean, and a lot of it is that it's just so mentally taxing and emotionally taxing that most people. And look, this is not to say anything bad about anybody because it is a very tough program. And to be honest with you, when I made it through, I kind of surprised myself. But um, I think it just gave me that edge to be able to make it through those certain really tough situations that most people broke down and decided to leave the facility.
Gosh,
Um,
for me, I feel like 1 in 100 success rate is good for Navy SEALs. It, you know what I
yeah,
mean? But for
yeah, no,
a treatment
it's
program, it should be 100 out of 100.
yeah. Well, the deal is that not everybody who left that facility went and relapsed and went back into addiction, right? I mean, there were people who made it a year who really got what they needed, and that probably factored into them leaving,
Hmm.
right? They probably said, well, yeah, I'm not finished, but I've pretty much got what I needed. I'm facing this adverse situation. I'd rather just, go and finish my sobriety up on the outside. So, just because people didn't finish, I wouldn't say they didn't necessarily get what they needed from the
Right.
program.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Um, and I've talked to other people who went through addiction treatment.
Mhm.
Some of them used the like ibogaine to just really kind of
Yes.
break out of their addictions and then moved on to life. And some went through 12-step programs and
Mhm.
some didn't. Um, Kind of what was your takeaway from all of this? If somebody's out there listening and is going through addiction and really struggling, how do you see psychedelics playing a role in potential recovery?
So, that's it's a multifaceted but very good question, because I'm obviously still active in a recovery community. And, there are a host of different psychedelic and entheogenic substances that could help with potentially different types of addictions. Let me say this about like an opiate or methamphetamine or an alcohol addiction, particularly with alcohol or opiates that come with severe withdrawal. Ibogaine, I've never had the chance to experience it, but from what I hear, people who engage with the ibogaine and then after the ibogaine experience kind of switch their venue from where they were at in addiction to somewhere else and continue with aftercare, whether it be meetings or counselor or whatever. I hear there's a very high success rate with that. And so, if I was facing those three types of addictions right now, that would definitely be something that I would be looking into. But, with really any other addiction, I mean, I do believe that with proper intention and working safely and in a proper setting with really any of the medicine, the psychedelic medicines, I think can be beneficial. But again, it needs to be structured correctly with proper intention and an open heart and mind to realize that these medicines can tell you things about yourself that cut really, really deep and beyond just the addiction, like to the core fundamental problem with yourself that's even causing the addiction. And just to be open and willing to understand and accept that, and more importantly, more willing to work on that, I think is probably the most important part of choosing to engage with the psychedelic and entheogenic medicines and trying to treat addiction.
So there tends to be some underlying issue, trauma, something within addiction that, and the entheogens can with the proper work and the proper method can really help uncover that and get to that core cause.
Yes, I mean, and so for instance, and this kind of transcends addiction too, but there are many times I have been to ayahuasca ceremonies where people are shown events in their life that they were maybe even too young to remember, and shown that, look, this is actually what is called, and it might not be an addiction, but other negative behaviors, and are shown like, look, this is what happened to you, and this is what's causing it. You need to forgive this person or do this, and then you'll be able to actually move past this. And yeah, I've heard that happen numerous times.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to somebody who's looking at trying to help themselves with psychedelics in terms of setting, substance, dose, and you mentioned intention? What would, we're not here to tell anybody to go out there and do psychedelics. That's not what,
no.
It's not for everybody. We're not telling anybody out there to do it. But if somebody's listening and thinking, I need help, and I've been studying this and looking at this, what would you want them to take away and understand about doing it the right way and getting deep into the mind and to really get that help?
Well, at the outset, Stuart, I would say this: for everyone to understand that these substances they deserve the highest amount of respect that you can give it, because at the basic level, I agree that they're nothing to be. You don't play around with these substances, right? And I think that kind of goes to intention. Like, if you intend to heal from them, that comes with a certain amount of, inherent respect for the substances. And, I guess generally just safely, I guess starting out, it would be best to try to find other people who are engaging in, safely in the substances, and kind of be around or with someone who's experienced, to begin with. Where I'm at now in my use and or in my journey, I recommend to people to find people who are doing this ceremoniously, like in a ceremony. Generally, I find that if you can get a good ceremony place that are doing ceremonies, they have proper screening techniques, and they're able to watch over people, things of that nature. And that would be my recommendation. But there's obviously a bunch of different ways to skin the cat. But at the outset, have respect and intention.
Okay. And speaking of groups and finding it in a ceremonial setting, or at least one in which there's somebody there to, watch over you, a guide, a trip sitter, whatever you want to call it. Aren't you doing something right now? Don't you have a project going on where you are going to help people find those situations?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that's www.entheoconnect.com. And what we're doing there, just a brief background. Since I was released from treatment, I've kind of my view and engagement with these substances has kind of gone over to the spiritual end of it. Just because that's what's been most helpful for me, and I see a lot of people getting help from it in that context. And so I actually ended up, and I don't know if I told you, but I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Texas, and so I ended up actually doing a lot of work helping, in the U.S., people who are running these ceremonies and retreats get their legal documentation together. And so through that, I built up a fairly extensive network of, what I would consider good ceremonies, good and safe ceremonies and retreats here in the U.S. And so with the website, we're going to be trying to connect people in that space to each other and also connect them to these ceremonies and retreats. We'll have reviews and everything like that to try to, people who are interested in entering that space, which I would say entheogen and spirituality space roughly, to help them match up with a place that's good for them or that they feel comfortable with.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because I know I get a lot of that with people. They're wanting help. They've done some research and they just don't know where to start or where to find a good group because everybody reads about going to Peru or Colombia and
Yes.
ceremonies, but every time you do a Google search for that, one of the results is somebody is assaulted or killed or dies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so, and that's it. Is we want, and one of the more ultimate objectives, I guess, with this site is to make, these substances and ceremonies more accessible to the average everyday person, right? Because there's a lot of people that probably that do need or probably need these, this help, but can't afford to go to Peru, or like you say, are scared to go to Peru, understandably,
Hmm.
in the middle of the Amazon with people they don't know. So, here in the U.S., through my work, I've found that there are great ceremonies and retreats with people who have probably been through exactly what the person looking for that retreat has been through.
Hmm.
It can help screen them and guide them through this whole process, and a lot of these places have integration services, things of that nature to really help people all the way through the whole spectrum of, from having the problem, engaging in the ceremony with the substances, and afterwards helping them put, those profound insights into action. And so that's what my hope is. I just want everybody to have the opportunity, if they feel so called, to, engage with these medicines.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. As being a lawyer and open about all this, as you have worked with psychedelics, have you experienced any of the stigma out there or pushback or, legally,
Yeah.
professionally, and personally?
Professionally, not too much. It's obviously I don't go into like depositions telling everybody like, hey, you need to,
Yeah.
you need to try mushrooms, right? But there are a lot of lawyers, and so I wrote my book on the mental health benefits of psilocybin back. I published it this last June,
Hmm.
um, and there were quite a few people in our legal community here that read it and love it and expressed their desire to me to one day try mushrooms or psilocybin. And
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of them out there, especially in the legal community, that I definitely have an interest in it. But again, the stigma kind of prevents them from voicing that too
Yeah.
loudly. I tell you where I did get blowback though was actually my sister. My sister lives here in Baton Rouge, same town I do, and I love her to death. I'll put that caveat out there, but
Yeah.
she is in this such a socially constructed world that for me, her brother to write a book on these substances offended her so greatly that she cut off communication with me and cut me off from communication with my two nieces for about 3 months.
Wow.
until it kind of blew over. And now we just don't even mention it. I don't even mention it out of respect for her,
Right.
you know, when I'm around. But yeah, so I have experienced some pretty harsh consequences, directly.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I hope that gets ironed out.
It basically has. Look,
Okay,
again,
good.
like I say, when I go to her house out of respect, I just don't mention it and just kind of let sleeping dogs lie there. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I think we've all dealt with those kind of
Mhm.
things. It's always a little rough, but as long as they work themselves out, that's at least we can
And,
ask that much.
and I'll tell you one thing about me, Stuart, is that I feel like it's important for people like me who are working professionals and to be vocal to a certain extent about this because a lot of people have in their minds, which is just this socially constructed view that's been spoon fed over the years that, people who engage in the, and you probably had this view at one time, I think you kind of mentioned earlier, is that, people who do those are just druggies
Hmm.
and losers and stuff, but it's really not like that. I mean, as I go to these sacred ceremonies around, especially the U.S., I mean, I'm networking with other lawyers, doctors, like very, very intelligent and driven people who do very well and, have just found more to their spiritual side through these ceremonies than anywhere else, and you can't blame somebody for, if something makes someone feel more complete or at peace, you cannot blame them for seeking that.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. So I guess my last question, and then I'll just let you say whatever you want there at the end. But one thing I'm curious about with you being an attorney is what do you have opinions on the whole decriminalization effort going on across the country?
Yeah, so I do. I love it. I when I first got into the space, Stuart, when I say that, I mean like contributing to the space. I
Hmm.
published my book on the mental health benefits of psilocybin, which is more or less a compilation of all the research that had been conducted up through February 2020.
Hmm.
And when I wrote that book, I thought, man, this research is it. This is what's going to lead to the ultimate, acceptance and legalization of these substances. But I quickly learned that, there is also this decriminalization end, and there's also this entheogenic church end that's going on, right? So I see it
Hmm.
kind of as a three-pronged front that works to eventually lead to this societal breakdown of negative perception and views, right?
Hmm.
As more people become aware that people in these different scenarios are using these substances and everything's fine, the sky is not falling. Um, I think it slowly leads to society, breaking down those views. And so, with that being said, I support all three in every single way I can. I have people reach out in pretty much all three, in parts of that, on a weekly basis. And I try to jump in and get involved wherever I can, because I think that those three will work together in tandem, um, to help achieve this ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
All right, Greg. Well, what else? Before we wrap this up, do you have anything else that I did not ask you that you want to get out there?
I just want to say, well, again, thank you very much for having me. And, I'll say this for me personally, working with psilocybin and some of these other medicines has made a profound impact and change on my life. I was an addict for 17 years, and now I'm sober. I'm working essentially a job, and then I have two side jobs, and just a complete different change in my life, a different change in perspective. I love life now, and I'm able to accept and overcome just about any circumstance that's thrown my way. And so, for the people out there, if and let me say one thing, Stuart. I think a lot of times people get an internal call to these substances. I think
Mm,
that it's already kind of brewing, and then they hear something like maybe your podcast or um, see something or maybe an article on Facebook, and that kind of really drives them there, and that's great. There's a lot of research to be done prior to hopping into these things, but there's also a lot of stuff online that can be read and watched and listened to. And yeah, I just encourage anybody who feels the call to to come and answer it. Just be careful and be safe.
Perfect. Well, Greg, thank you so much. That was really good stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and share this. I know you're going to help some people, and I wish you the best of luck with your upcoming book and with entheoconnect.com. I will definitely be signing up for that and becoming a part of that. So thanks for everything you do, man.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. I appreciate you. You have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.